Good morning, Encounter. My name is Joel Pasmino. If you're joining us for the first time, I'm the lead pastor of Encounter Church, and today we're doing things a little bit different. As you know, most of you, all of you probably know, right now our whole country is trying to fight the rate at which the coronavirus is spreading, and what most of all of our government officials really have told us is the best way we can do this by practicing social isolation and to refraining from gathering in large groups. So we believe that the most loving and compassionate and responsible thing we could do as a church was to suspend our public in-person gathering. But we did not want to just leave that space empty because we believe that there's any time when we need to turn to God, anytime that when we need to hear a word of hope and encouragement is now. So we usually don't live stream our services, but we rig something up real quick to try to put something together for you to experience. So this morning we're having an online worship experience. We're gonna have some music, and the words are gonna be on the screen, so you can follow along. And invite you to either reflect on them or think about them, or sing along if you know the songs, and you can like let that hope wash over you. And then you're gonna hear a sermon, and we're gonna share communion together. My hope is that this morning, wherever you are, whether you're on your couch, on your bed, or wherever you're watching this, that you will know that we love you, that we know that we care for you, that you will know that you don't have to feel alone, that there's this community, even though we're not together physically, we're together in spirit. And thanks to technology, we're able to worship together as well.
Good morning, Encounter. We are so glad that you're here with us this morning. I know it may feel weird to be here at church worshiping on your couch, but we just ask that you join us as we just thank God for his abounding love in this time when we don't really know what's going to happen. We don't know how we should respond or how he's going to respond, but we're just trusting. We're just going to celebrate how great our God is, even in uncertain times like this. So would you sing with us? You give light, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope. You restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lands, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope. these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah.
Oh, your love. Thank you for your love.
No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Oh, Lord, we thank you for your love.
Hi again, Encounter. We're in the middle of a series on forgiveness for Lent, and I fear that today probably was best to make a pause on that for a week and address what's been on my mind. I'm guessing what's been on your mind, on everybody's mind, really, which is all of the uncertainty coming with the coronavirus, not only here in the city but honestly all over the world. Right? There's a lot of changes that have been happening honestly from like day to day and even hour to hour, and that's gotta be hard to deal with. I'm concerned. I'll be honest. I'm concerned. There's my family has to make it to a flight back to Ecuador before Monday because Ecuador is shutting its borders, and they're concerned about that. There's all sorts of things going on, and it's a difficult time. We should be honest about that. It's a difficult time for everybody. So what I wanted to do this morning is maybe just take a second and see if there's something that we can find in the scriptures that can maybe give us some hope and maybe give us some wisdom as to how we are dealing with this. There's a story in the Gospel of Mark about Jesus and his disciples going through a storm in the Sea of Galilee. They've been doing some ministry and they need to get to the other side of the boat, of the lake. So they get on this boat and they go through a storm. And it's a big storm. Like the disciples, most of them are fishermen, so they should be aware of storms. They're not people that just get scared from them, and yet they're worried and they're looking for Jesus, and Jesus is asleep. And they wake Jesus up, and what they tell Jesus is, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" And Mark, keeps going, and he says he got up, talking about Jesus, and rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." In many ways, it can feel right now like we're in a storm. A week ago, our lives were a certain way. And now they're very different. Most of you a week ago were going to all of your offices and everything was fine. And now for the foreseeable future, you have to work from home. Maybe if you have a child, your child is now not going to school, but he or she is at home with you, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to be able to care for your child and keep them entertained and do work. And maybe your spouse is also home from work. It's kind of crazy. There's a lot of uncertainty. If you had money in the stock market right now, that's a concern. Like there's a storm going on. And I think we have to be honest about that, because one of the things that concerns me is that I've seen a lot of bravado and honestly a little bit of arrogance of people that are just saying, hey, you just have to have faith and you just have to have hope, and not acknowledge the reality of the situation. There's people who, this might be a situation of life and death, that are very vulnerable to this disease. There's people maybe in your life that are in a quarantine right now, in a self-quarantine. And what we see in this story is that the scriptures never ignore the fact that the storms of life come. Disciples and Jesus, for that matter, Jesus is not saying, why do you believe that there is a storm coming? Don't you see that this is a conspiracy from the media or from another country? No. Jesus acknowledges the fact that there is a storm. The disciples acknowledge the fact that there is a storm. They take it seriously. One of the reasons why we're not meeting this morning is precisely because we want to take this seriously. We don't want to ignore it and pretend it's not happening and we feel like the most loving thing that we can do for our community, not only to serve the efforts of the city trying to slow down the spread of the virus, but also to care for the people that are in our community that could be vulnerable to it, the elderly people, or people in our extended families and circles of life and relationship that could be exposed to it. So the most loving thing we can do right now is to acknowledge what's going on and to take the necessary precautions and the necessary measures to help the collective fight that we're putting up as a country, trying to slow down the spread of the virus. There's nothing wrong with that. Taking caution is not exclusive. It's not diametrically opposed to having faith. They're not mutually exclusive. You can take cautions and precautions, and you can have faith, and you can have hope. Because if we're honest, that's the end of the danger that's going on right now, right? That there is also a sense of, beyond just concern and beyond just taking the necessary precautions, there's a sense of fear going on. If you go to any grocery store right now and the way that you see all the shelves empty, that's a testimony to the fact that there's many people that are very afraid, that they don't know what's going to happen next week. They don't know what's going to happen next month. So it's like, let's just kind of like, get all the toilet paper and be safe for the time being. There's people that are looking at the stock market and are really concerned. People that maybe, they don't know where their income or their livelihood is going to come because so many things are being canceled. And, people that had income counting on, that's out the window right now. So there is this sense in which very easily we can, as a society, but also individually, descend into panic and into fear. And to that, though, Jesus has something to say. To that, the scriptures has something to say. Because Jesus comes into this story and he doesn't say there's no storm, but then he calms the storm. And he asks the disciples, why didn't you have faith? Now, I don't think that when Jesus says, why didn't you have faith, it wasn't a faith of, hey, why didn't you pretend that this wasn't happening? Or why didn't you just ignore it and not take the necessary precautions? I think that the faith that Jesus was talking about was, why don't you have faith in the fact that I'm with you on the boat in the middle of the storm? Because let me tell you what, when you look at the scriptures, you're going to see that tragedies happen, that difficult times happen, that the storms of life happen. And the one thing that we see as a constant is that in the middle of that, God is there with his people. That God doesn't abandon people in the midst of a problem. And that's a faith and that's a hope that I want to invite you to embrace this morning. Part of what's happening right now is that for a lot of us, the illusion of the control that we had over our lives is being exposed. Up until last week, we've had these lives that are very, predictable to a certain degree, right? You have your job and you have your 9 to 5 and you have your routine. We live in a world of incredible technological advancement, right? Like we can pull out our phone and we can press a button and, a stranger's gonna show up in a car and take us wherever we need to, and we don't even have to give them cash. It's all like happening, in online, virtually. We don't have to touch it. Up until last week, you could have gone to a website and you could have ordered all the toilet paper that you needed, and it was shown up in your house the next day. And that's not the case right now. And that sounds like a joke, but part of what's going on right now is not only the fear of the spread of the virus and of the danger of the virus, but it's a legitimate fear of the unexpected. That we really don't know what's going to happen next week. We really don't know what's going to happen next month. And there's a certain concern that we have because of that. Now, there's a Bible teacher named Barbara Brown Taylor, and she has this phrase I really like. She says, we do not lose control of our lives. What we lose is the illusion that we were ever in control in the first place. And that's what's happening right now, that there is a sense of this loss of control. And what's fascinating about the story of Jesus and his disciples on the boat is that Jesus is basically telling them, you know why you have faith? because you thought that you can control this. And when you realize you couldn't control it, you freaked out. And part of the story is not necessarily saying that every time that something bad happens, Jesus is going to make it go away or calm it. It's the idea that when you're in a boat with God, God is the one who's in control of the boat, not you. And God is the one who's in control of what's going on around you, not you. And part of what a lot of us are going to learn to have to do is to relinquish the illusion of control. Now, why is that important? Because I think that in there, it's probably the key to why there is so much fear and panic right now. There's this movie from 2011 called Contagion. I don't know if you've seen it. It's actually eerily prescient of what's happening right now, right? It's about this epidemic that, goes all over the world, and it's a much more dramatic thing. Like everybody, dies from it. And I was watching the trailer last week. And in the trailer, there's this slogan for the movie is, no one is immune to fear. And the idea is that the movie is not only about the spread of the virus, it's about the spread of fear. It's about the spread of anxiety. It's about the spread of worry because of the uncertainty of the situation. Now, when we learn to relinquish control, when you learn to trust God, we can embrace hope instead of fear. Now, why should we trust God? In a couple of weeks, we're going to celebrate Easter. Not only our church, but churches all over the world. And Easter is the celebration of the death and the resurrection of Christ. And for us, in that story, is wrapped up all of the hope that the world needs. Because that story for us means that God hasn't given up on the world, but also that God doesn't ignore the pain and the suffering of the world. That God has entered into our story through Jesus Christ. And that Jesus Christ has demonstrated the love and the care of God by giving up his life. And not only that, but he also has demonstrated the power of God and has demonstrated where God is taking history. A lot of times when we are afraid in a situation like this, part of what worries us is that our mind very easily goes to the worst case scenario. So in our minds right now, people are thinking that it's going to turn into like The Walking Dead. And that's where they're soaking up in toilet paper because they're afraid. In the Easter story though, the worst thing that can happen to somebody happens to Jesus. Jesus is betrayed. Jesus is arrested. Jesus is put on trial. He's tortured. He eventually is crucified and he dies. But the story doesn't end there. What the Christian faith believes on the third day, Jesus literally rose from the dead. That somehow in Jesus, the power that death had over the world has been defeated. Christians believe that death doesn't have the last word on our story. That the world is going somewhere and it's somewhere good, and that's where God is taking it. And what happens is that when we believe in that, when we believe in Jesus, when we join our lives, when we join our story to the story of God, we believe that that's our future. So we have no reason to be afraid. And that hope looks in different ways, right? One of the ways is that we believe that God can protect us now. That we legitimately believe that God is somebody that we can call on for protection and we can call on for help in our life right now. A couple of days ago on an Instagram video for the church, I read this verse from Psalm 91 that says, "Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. Surely He will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday." We can look to God for comfort now. Now, sometimes things happen. And part of what you see in the story that we read earlier is that, just because you're with Jesus, it doesn't mean that the storm isn't going to come. And our hope then is that when the storms of life happen and come, that God is on the boat with us. And ultimately, no matter what happens to that boat, I would much rather be on the boat with God than out when everything is calm and quiet without God. So the best place to be is right there. And now, let's be honest. Sometimes the worst things happen. Let's just ignore that. There's people that suffer and there's people that lose their lives. Like, this is a reality of life and we have to admit and embrace it. But this is the thing. What does the Easter story believe? The Easter story believes that death doesn't have the final word. That when we've trusted in Christ, when we've put our lives and our hopes on Jesus, that death cannot hurt us forever anymore. That Jesus has the last word over our lives, and that word is life. And that word is restoration. And that word is resurrection. And if that's the case, then the worst thing that anything can do to me doesn't intimidate me anymore. Coronavirus doesn't have the last word over my life. The situation in the stock market doesn't have the last word over my life. Unemployment, divorce, cancer, fear, anxiety, loneliness. They don't have the last word. Jesus has the last word, and it's always a word of love. And it's always a word of hope. Now, why is this important? Because I believe that right now, what our society needs, what our world needs, is not for people to be afraid, but for people to embrace love. And the reason why is because fear makes us selfish. The more afraid we are, the more that we start thinking about ourselves. That's why we're hoarding toilet paper, by the way. Because we're thinking, okay, something bad can happen. It's every man for himself, every woman for himself. So let's just get all the stuff that we can and hunker down and look out for ourselves. And the problem is that the situation that's going on right now, it makes most vulnerable people that are already vulnerable. It's the elderly. It's people that already have some form of medical condition, some form of fragile immune system. They are the ones that are most at risk during this pandemic. The economic impact and fallout that's going to come from all of the closures, from all the things that have happened in the last week and that are going to keep happening, is people that have usually not stable incomes. People that maybe are in the service industry and depend on the tips that they get. People whose livelihoods are, connected to events that have been canceled. Those are the people that are going to be the most vulnerable right now. And what those people need is for us to embrace boldness and hope and to go out and love them the most that we can. And when we do that, fear goes away. The Apostle John in one of his letters says that perfect love casts out all fear. If you embrace hope and love, fear will go away. And that's, I think, what the world needs right now. There's a sociology professor at Baylor named Rodney Stark. And Rodney Stark has done a lot of work studying how Christianity spread at the beginning of the first century. And his theory is that one of the main reasons why Christianity survived and thrived as a religion was because in the first couple of centuries of the Roman Empire after the resurrection of Jesus, there were a number of natural calamities and urban plagues that attacked and targeted the city of Rome. And a lot of times what was happening was that during those plagues, the people from the city were kind of like abandoning people and abandoning the city. And the ones that were stepping up to care for them were the Christians. There's a bishop of the time called Dionysius of Alexandria. And he talks about one of those plagues. One of those plagues is what's called the plague of Cyprian that happened around 250 AD. And most historians think that it was smallpox. And in Dionysius' records, he says this. He says, he talks about how the effect of the plague was. And he says, at the first onset of the disease, talking about how the pagan Romans reacted to the plague, they pushed off the sufferers away and fled from their dearest. throwing them into the roads before they were dead and treated unburied corpses as dirt, hoping thereby to avert the spread and contagion of the fatal disease. Now, this is how Dionysius describes the church's reaction. Most of our brother Christians showed unbounded love and loyalty, never sparing themselves and thinking only of one another. Heedless of danger, they took charge of the sick, attending to their every need and ministering to them in Christ. And the argument that Stark makes and that many other historians make is that when the plague was over, well, all these people that had been treated by them, or the family members had been treated by them, where was the example of love and compassion and hope? It was one of these Christians that loved their neighbors. And that's what people need right now. The temptation to turn inward is going to be very, very present the next couple of weeks. And this is a time that we have to love our neighbors in a number of ways. One, by practicing caution. And right now, what all of our government officials are telling us is that practicing social distancing to help slow down the spread of the disease is the best way that we all can help. And washing our hands and taking all the normal hygienic measures, it's the best thing we can do. But there are other things. There's people in your community, maybe elderly people, that are worried and isolated. They don't know, they're afraid of getting out because they're going to be exposed to the disease, that maybe need errands run, maybe they need somebody to get groceries for them. And maybe that's a place where we can step in and help them and take care of them. There's people that are home from work and that can take care of their child who's also home right now, and maybe you have time off, or maybe you can somehow help alleviate that need. There's people whose income and livelihood is being very affected by everything that's going on right now, and maybe this is a time that we practice generosity in caring for our neighbors. One of the things I want to do in the next few weeks, are there ways that we can help as a church? Are there needs in our community that we don't know about that we can meet? And we're going to give you all of the resources to take care of that. But my friends, what I'm telling you right now is this. Right now, what our city needs, what our country needs, what our world needs, is for people to not be arrogant and to not ignore the facts and to not pretend that nothing is happening. But actually people that acknowledge that something is happening, and yet at the same time, even though they take all the cautionary measures that need to be taken, that choose to say no to fear and despair and anxiety, and they choose to say yes to hope and to faith and to love. And that's the best possible way to live. In the Gospel of Matthew, there's another passage that talks about storms. Jesus finished kind of like giving his most famous talk, the Sermon on the Mount. And at the end of the sermon, he says something along the lines that, you know what, if you listen to my teachings, he says, that's going to be like a man that built a house on a rock foundation. And he says, when the storms of life came, the house was able to stand. He says, if you don't listen to my teachings, well, that's like building your house on sand. And when the storms of life come, what happens? Well, the house collapses. We have a choice of how we want to live our lives. And my encouragement to you is to not build your life on fear and anxiety and worry, but to build your life in hope and in faith and in love. To build your life on the foundation of Jesus, because that's the best possible way to live. One of the things that we do together as a church every Sunday when we gather is we share communion. Communion is representation of the Last Supper that Jesus shared with his disciples, and for us is a memorial of the death of Jesus, the crucifixion of Jesus. Is part of the Easter story that we've been talking about this morning. And every Sunday we don't want the fact that we're not physically together to stop us from doing that. So we're gonna try to have communion virtually together. So maybe if you don't have communion elements right now on your table. Maybe you want to pause this for a second, and maybe you have some wine or some grape juice, something that you can use, and then some bread. If you are with a group of people, just make sure that they're all like individually separated, and we're going to share communion together. Every Sunday when we do this, we try to think of something to reflect on while we're sharing communion. And perhaps the thing that we should reflect on today is this. The story of the crucifixion of Jesus, of the death of Jesus, is the story that the worst thing that could have happened to God happened. A lot of us are afraid of the worst case scenario, right? We talked about this. This was God's worst case scenario, his son dying on the cross. Jesus' worst case scenario, his life being taken. And yet he doesn't let that stop him from love. Jesus willingly embraces the worst thing that could happen, not for his sake, but for our sake. Jesus, the night that he's betrayed, he has his meal with his disciples, and he takes the bread. And he looks at his disciples and he says that this is not for him, but for him. He says, this is my body. And then he says, it's broken for you. And in the same way, then he takes the wine and he says, this is my blood poured out for you. Do you get what I'm saying? The sacrifice of Jesus is God going into the worst case scenario, into the worst thing that could happen for your sake. And because we know that the story doesn't end there, but that Jesus resurrects, we don't have to live in fear. So in this meal, there is hope. So I want to invite you to take some bread with you and to break a piece off of it and to remember the words of Jesus. This is my body broken for you. Let's take the bread together. Then he takes a cup and he starts pouring it for his disciples. And he says, this is my blood poured out for you. Why do I have hope? Why am I not afraid? Because Jesus poured himself out for me. So let's join in the cup. You pray with me. Father, we thank you for the sacrifice of your son and how the story of Jesus giving up his life, facing the worst of humanity, the worst that we can do for love, for our sake, emboldens us and fills us with hope so that we can go and love on the world. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath he could ever breathe. We live for you. Sing Jesus, Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, yes, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes and wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, yes we do. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, yeah, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Lead me. Lead me in your love. Jesus, we ask you, help us trust in you, Lord. Help us give it all to you. Yeah. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken, and I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken, and I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me.
One of the things that we do every Sunday together also is that we take a time to talk about generosity and how you can give to encounter and join the mission of the church. We believe that generosity is an act of worship just as much as everything else that we do. And that when we come together with our resources, we can be a better force for good in the world, in our community. We don't know really right now what are the needs that are going to rise up for people in our church and maybe for things in our community, but we want to be able to help to do something about that, to help in whatever way we can. So I want to challenge you to do that today. Like, don't live in fear. One of the things that sometimes when we do, when we're afraid, so we kind of like start like, let's not spend any money, let's not do anything. Don't let that rule you right now. Let's live lives of generosity. Let's care for the people around us. Let's care for the people in our community, individually, but also corporately as church. So if you want to give to Encounter, we have a website. Most of our giving is done online already. You can go to encounterdc.com/give, and you can do a one-time donation, or you can sign up to a recurring gift and help us keep continuing to be a blessing for this community. The final thing that we do when we gather is that we do a benediction. Benediction, it just means a good word. And we like to say around Encounter is that we live in a world where enough bad words are spoken over our lives from Monday through Friday. This has been a week where a lot of bad words have been spoken over life, over the world, a lot of fear, a lot of concern, a lot of vitriol to one another. And maybe this is a moment we start changing the tide with that, where we start speaking words of love and of hope. So, my brothers and sisters of Encounter, may you know that in whatever storm of life you find yourself in, whether it's the coronavirus that we're all dealing with right now or anything else that comes your way, may you know that God is in the boat with you. And that no matter what comes, you're not facing it alone, but God is right next to you. May you, because of that, reject fear and embrace faith and embrace hope and embrace love. May you be a force for good and love and peace in your community right now. May you be able to care for your family. May you be able to care for your neighbors. May you be able to shine a light at a time where it's desperately needed. And may grace and peace be with you. One final thing. We're trying to take this week to week. Our hope is that we can go back to meeting publicly as soon as possible, but we don't really know when that's going to be yet. So we're praying with the leadership of the church, and our hope is that at the beginning of the week, maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll make a decision about what's going to happen next Sunday. So stay tuned to our social media and follow us there. If you're watching this on Facebook, you follow us. Look us up on Instagram, or go to our website, and at the bottom of the homepage, there's a form where you can sign up to our newsletter. And that's probably the best way that you can find out what's going on. You'll get that straight into your inbox, and we'll be in touch in all of our communication platforms. Grace and peace.